This is a story called The Little Monsters, Chapter 71, The Train Crash. It's a weekend and the kids are out playing near the railway station when it started to snow really heavily. They decided to go back to Bumpy's house to play. Excuse me. They stayed at Bumpy's house for a couple of hours and then her dad took them all home. The next day the kids went to school as normal, but just before morning break they were all sent home because of the snow. All the teachers called the parents of each child to let them know excuse me, to let them know that the kids were being sent home because of the weather conditions and to tell them to come and pick them up. Of course, all the parents came and picked their kids up, even the Little Monsters' parents. The gang all wanted to play at each other's houses, but their parents didn't think it was such a good idea because of the weather conditions. Excuse me. For 3 whole days, the kids didn't see each other because of the snow. They couldn't even ring each other because the phone lines were down. However, after 6 days the sun was shining and the snow was clearing, meaning the kids could go back to school. A couple of days later the kids were in school when the snow suddenly started again. But this time it was already home time, so the kids were allowed to go home. The next day was Saturday, so the kids all went to Creeper's house for a sleepover. Excuse me. The next day the snow had stopped, so the kids got wrapped up warm and went to play outside for a bit. After they'd been outside for a while, it started to rain, so they went back into Creeper's house. And not long after that, they all went home. The next day it constantly rained, so the kids went to Bumpy's house to play. Excuse me. The next day when the kids were on their way to school, it was frosty, slippery and very cold. On their way there they decided to walk down the railway station as they were early, so they decided to go the long way round. As they did so they heard a huge bang, and when they looked, a train had gone off the tracks because of the ice and crashed into another train. The kids knew that there would be people injured and that they had to help. They ran into the station and climbed onto the trains without a thought for their own safety. They started helping the walking wounded off the train, and those that couldn't walk off the train were helped by the kids. The emergency services had been alerted, but it was taking them ages to get there because of the weather conditions. The kids knew that they should have been at school, but they didn't care. They just wanted to help the people off the trains. Just as the kids thought that everyone was off the train, they heard someone crying for help. When they looked, there was a young man trapped under the seat and there was debris all over him. They cleared the debris, but his leg was broken and he couldn't move. They got a plank of wood and their shoelaces out of their shoes and made a splint. Then they tied it to the man's leg, and between them they managed to help him off the train. An hour had passed since the emergency services had been called, but they still hadn't arrived. There was people sat on the floor freezing and shivering with cold and injured. The kids were doing their best to comfort them and to keep them warm. Then Kika heard someone crying for help. When she went to look, she saw a young mum with a toddler and a tiny baby in a double pram. The mum was trapped under some debris with a cut head. Excuse me, with a cut head and a broken arm, and she couldn't move. She was desperately trying to get to her babies, who were both crying, but she couldn't. Kika quickly ran and got the others, and between them they managed to rescue her and get her and her babies safely off the train. However, as they were doing so, part of the train exploded, setting part of the other train on fire. Creeper suddenly started screaming, and when Kicker looked, she was on fire, and someone poured water on her. 2 hours had passed and the emergency services still hadn't arrived, so someone called them again. They explained the situation had worsened and the operator apologised and said that they'd be with them as soon as possible. After about another half an hour, the emergency services finally arrived. The fire brigade put out the fire, the paramedics treated the wounded and took them to hospital. The police spoke to the staff and then they spoke to the kids. They told the kids that what they'd done was amazing and very brave and courageous, but they shouldn't have put their own lives at risk to save others the way they did. By this time the newspaper and TV crews had arrived and they interviewed the kids and the railway staff. When they'd finished, the kids made their way to the hospital to see Creeper. When they got there, Creeper was having surgery on her burns, so they wouldn't be able to see her until the next day. They decided to go and visit some of the patients from the train crash. That night, their faces and story were all over the evening papers and TV. What the kids didn't realise was that they'd all been nominated to receive a Child of Courage award each. When they went to school the next day, they thought that they'd be in trouble, but as they approached the school gates, everyone gathered round and gave them a round of applause, and even the Tremblers gang. That morning during assembly, Mrs. Tinker asked them to go to the front of the assembly hall, and again they thought that they were in trouble. However, as they were going to the front, the whole school gave them another round of applause. Creeper had to stay in hospital for just over a week and then she was allowed to go home. She couldn't go back to school for another couple of weeks, so Mrs. Applejack sent work home for her to do. In time she made a full recovery and all the gang received a bravery award each. Everyone said that they deserved it for what they'd done. End of chapter 71. Thanks for watching, guys.